Before I begin, let me say that we are very lucky. Thanks to alert New Yorkers and professional police officers, we avoided what could have been a very deadly event. Firefighters, emergency service officers, and the bomb squad responded, and the bomb squad confirmed that the suspicious vehicle did indeed contain an explosive device.
On May 1st, 2010, police found a crude car bomb in the heart of New York City's Times Square. The incident was the latest in a series of high-profile terror attempts since the September 11, 2001 hijackings that culminated in the destruction of the Twin Towers.
With each attempted attack on American soil, America has lost more than just lives. As each attack highlighted the need for new measures to protect the nation from its enemies, Americans have allowed for the expansion of a federal government that does have the nation's best interests at heart, but whose individual policymakers often disagree about how to best defend both the United States and the rights of its citizens.
The case of the Times Square bomber was no exception. The moment Faisal Shahzad was arrested, critics immediately began to offer their own opinions on what could have been done better.
And the question today is whether or not the Times Square terror suspect, Faisal Shahzad, should have been read his Miranda rights.
Don't give this guy his Miranda rights until we find out what it's all about.
I don't believe somebody like Faisal Shahzad should receive Miranda rights. I don't believe.
According to these legislators, the latest front in the war on terror is Miranda rights. But what exactly is the problem with Miranda rights? The term Miranda rights comes from the 1966 Supreme Court case Miranda v. Arizona, which ruled that police must inform suspects of their Fifth Amendment rights before interrogating them.
The Fifth Amendment generally protects citizens against harassment from the government. For instance, the government can't harass people by trying them more than once for the same crime. It can't compel people to give evidence against themselves, and people cannot be punished without due process of law.
In the Miranda decision, Chief Justice Earl Warren wrote the opinion of the 5-4 majority, stating that if a suspect in any manner and at any time indicates a wish to remain silent, the interrogation must cease.
Critics of the Miranda decision often question what would happen in a ticking time bomb scenario, where an immediate threat requires unrestricted interrogation. However, the Miranda ruling does not prohibit investigators from interrogating suspects and acting on the information they obtain. The ruling only prohibits prosecutors from presenting evidence obtained via such interrogations in court. That means, for example, that a police officer can obtain information from a suspect regarding the location of a ticking time bomb, but may not present that statement as evidence in prosecuting the suspect. Furthermore, should a prosecutor wish to cite the evidence in court, the 1982 Supreme Court case of New York v. Quarles ruled that if a prosecutor can prove that there was a clear and present danger, information obtained from pre-Miranda interrogations could be admitted into court. On top of that, the decision placed no time limit on this public safety exception, meaning that investigators could legally interrogate a suspect indefinitely, provided that they prove that there was a clear and present danger involved.
Right? No one can tell us why we need these additional powers. You have the public safety exception. It's worked in both the Christmas bomber and the Times Square bomber. We've got them talking. We're using their statements against them. What powers does the government have now that it doesn't yet need?
As Romero indicated, the Miranda public safety exception is already incredibly broad. It already allows for unlimited interrogation of terror suspects that present an imminent threat. In fact, the public safety exception was invoked in both the Christmas bombing of 2009 and the Times Square bomber case. Under the public safety exception, the FBI interrogated Faisal Shahzad for 4 hours before reading him his Miranda rights.
Given how broad the public safety exception already is, you might think that any knowledgeable lawyer would see no need to modify the rules that interrogators already have.
We're now dealing with international terrorism, and I think that we have to think about perhaps modifying the rules that interrogators have.
So let me unpack that a little bit. What you'd like to see happen is that Congress would pass a law that would say to judges, hey, look, in this environment, if we extract information that could be valuable intelligence about another terror plot, about who they're involved in, whether they're connected to the Pakistani Taliban. We want to get all that without them lawyering up and still be able to use that against them in a court of law. And you need more flexibility to do that, you think?
Yeah, we certainly need more flexibility.
Although Holder now supports further limiting Miranda rights, this was not always the case. Only a week before his interview on Meet the Press, the Attorney General testified before Congress on the administration's interrogating techniques. There, he defended the use of the public safety exception for extended periods of time, noting that the Supreme Court never specified a time limit in New York v. Quarles.
Holder is just one of many Washington officials proposing further limitations on Miranda rights. In March, Senators McCain and Lieberman introduced a bill allowing the unmirandized interrogation of terror suspects. More significantly, last week on June 1, 2010, the Supreme Court ruled that a suspect can be interrogated despite the Fifth Amendment unless the suspect explicitly states his intent to retain his rights. Under the new ruling, a suspect is now assumed to have waived his rights unless he explicitly states otherwise. Make no mistake, this ruling was not about terrorism. In fact, the case was a murder trial. But due to the political rhetoric of the past months, we've each lost rights that protect us from government abuses. And for what reason? Would broader Miranda laws really help police investigations?
No, we talked about this when we heard about the ruling coming up before, and it really implied or express waiver doesn't really make a whole lot of difference with getting evidence or, the admissibility of the evidence. I think.
According to Sergeant Richmond and other officers, last week's decision won't even make us safer, so why do we continue to place limitations on rights? Each new terror attempt makes the historic tension between civil liberties and national security more relevant than ever. As we continue to fight the war on terror, we will have to sacrifice certain freedoms in the name of safety, but limiting rights should not be a quick fix for handling terror threats.
The terrorists have little respect for human rights, whether natural or civil rights. And if a terrorist is a U.S. citizen and has been arrested on U.S. soil, their crime is heinous. Nevertheless, we do not wish to sink to their level and deprive them of their legal rights. So I would say, as annoying and painful as that could be, the terrorist has the right to remain silent.
Since the September 11th attacks in 2001, rights like those in the Fifth Amendment have been eroded away, often unnecessarily. As we strive to protect ourselves by limiting terrorists' rights, it's important to remember that these same rights were originally conceived to protect the American people from abuse. As we continue to fight terror, the question for our democracy is this: is America merely a spot on the map that can be erased with a few successful attacks? Or is America a collection of immutable ideas, enumerated in our founding documents? If so, perhaps the simplest way to protect America is to preserve the freedoms that define it.